Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to share this incredible documentary story with you today. We're diving into The Sentinel of the High Cascades, which is just this truly fascinating look at a way of life that's, well, completely disappearing. We're going to follow 82-year-old Dan Mercer. Dan is literally one of the very last traditional fire lookout rangers in America. Way up high above the evergreen forests of Washington state, where the mountain peaks basically vanish right into the clouds, he lives in this lonely, rugged, wooden lookout tower. You know, in a modern world that's totally dominated by automation and screens and just instant data, this story sets the stage for a really powerful look at human intuition. It's a wake-up call about what we actually lose when we stop looking at the world with our own two eyes.
61. Just try to wrap your head around that massive number for a second. For 61 summers, Dan has spent his life in complete isolation at the top of that mountain. I mean, that is more than half a century of watching over millions of acres of Washington's vast evergreen forests. Every single day of those 61 seasons he's been up there, scanning the horizon, looking for just the absolute faintest, thinnest thread of wildfire smoke. No distractions, no crowds, just one man in the endless wilderness stretching out right beneath him.
Okay, let's dive right into this and see how a day actually begins for the Sentinel of the Mountains. At 5 a.m., way before the rest of the world has even thought about hitting the snooze button, Dan is up. The morning air is freezing, the clouds are still drifting way below the peak, and his morning routine, it's beautifully analog and totally distraction-free. First, he climbs the final wooden steps up into the tower. Next, he goes around and opens every single window to let the mountain air in. Finally, he sets his binoculars on the table and checks his physical weather instruments. There's no doom scrolling through a newsfeed here. There is just this deeply grounded, immediate connection with his environment.
Let's just pause for a second and let Dan's own words really sink in. He says, "The mountain always wakes before the people do." This isn't just some casual observation, right? It establishes this incredibly profound, patient connection with the natural world that modern society just ignores most of the time. We're always rushing from one artificial light to the next. But Dan, his entire existence is perfectly synchronized with the dawn, with the mountain itself. So what exactly is Dan's role? Well, he's a fire lookout ranger. But he isn't just a passive watcher. He is an active protector. He sits in his chair and hour after hour, he just slowly turns. North, east, south, west. He's doing these continuous 360-degree analog sweeps of every single valley, ridge, and distant peak. He is literally the first line of defense against absolute devastation. Because out there, a tiny ribbon of smoke could mean the start of a deadly wildfire. Now, as Dan smiles and points out, most days nothing happens, and honestly, that's exactly what you hope for. But you absolutely have to be there, staying vigilant just in case.
Section 1. The mechanics of observation. We really need to look at how a human being actually performs this monumental job, especially when you compare it to the complex machines that are slowly but surely replacing rangers across the country. And the contrast is absolutely fascinating. On one side, you have the modern way we monitor forests today: orbiting satellites, fleets of drones, aircraft, smartphones. It's all highly automated. But on the other side, you have Dan's tools. And they're the exact same tools he used during his very first season over 60 years ago. Maps, a compass, physical weather patterns, binoculars. He relies entirely on those physical tools and his own intensely honed intuition. A satellite might flag an anomaly on a digital grid, sure, but Dan's eyes, they can instantly tell the difference between harmless morning fog, simple campfire smoke, and dangerous lightning-caused wildfire smoke. And this brings us to Dan's core philosophy, which is absolutely crucial. He says, machines collect information, people understand it. Honestly, this is probably the most vital takeaway of this entire explainer. Just think about your own modern life for a second. We are constantly drowning in data, right? Alerts, notifications, emails, but we are so often starving for actual understanding and wisdom. Dan doesn't just see a data point on a screen. He understands the full context of the forest, the specific humidity in the air, the deep history of the terrain. Now, put yourself in his shoes on a sweltering summer afternoon. Suddenly, boom, lightning strikes a distant ridge. The whole situation instantly shifts from calm, quiet observation to high-stakes danger.
Within minutes, literally before the strike even has time to fully ignite the dry brush, Dan spots it. Just a faint column of smoke. Because he spent decades scanning this exact same horizon, he instantly spots a threat that is completely invisible to the valley down below.
And he doesn't hesitate for a second. He immediately grabs his radio, calls in the exact coordinates, and his rapid, precise human response sets the massive gears of containment right into motion. Fire crews on the ground hear his call and scramble instantly.
And just like that, the blaze is contained before it ever reaches the nearby communities. You can kind of let out a breath here. Just a few minutes of sharp human observation and decisive action literally saved entire towns from destruction. As the documentary shows, sometimes a few minutes changes absolutely everything.
Dan's own reflection on how he does this is just amazing. He says, "Experience teaches your eyes what books never can." His almost superhuman ability during that lightning strike, it wasn't downloaded from a server, it wasn't read in a training manual. It was born purely from half a century of unbroken, highly focused experience.
Let's move to Section 2, Mentorship and Legacy, and see how this builds. Knowing he won't be in the tower forever, a young forestry intern actually comes up to spend the season with Dan. Now, she arrives expecting high-tech tools and data models, but instead she gets a profound lesson in analog reality. She learns the deep observation of weather patterns, how to read subtle wind shifts, how to understand incredibly complex cloud behavior. These are totally becoming lost arts in our hyper-connected world. Dan is teaching her that protecting the forest requires deep-seated patience, not just a strong Wi-Fi signal. It requires actually being physically present in the environment you're trying to understand. On their final day together in this deeply emotional moment, Dan actually hands over his weathered binoculars to the intern. The leather case is literally faded white from decades beneath the intense mountain sun. He looks at her and says, "Always look twice. The forest deserves your full attention." And she accepts them with such quiet respect, you realize he isn't just handing over a tool here. This is the heavy, respectful transfer of generational knowledge. He's passing on a whole new way of seeing the world. Which brings us to Section 3, the final sunset.
Dan is spending his very last fire season in the tower, entering the twilight of both the day on the mountain and his extraordinary 61-year career. He's preparing to leave this mountaintop office for the very last time. And just think about the beautiful bookends of his life here. From his very first summer learning patience completely without technology, all the way to his 61st summer mentoring the next generation. And even on a micro level, his final day is a bookend. From opening the windows one last time at 5 a.m. to finally stepping out onto the wooden balcony at sunset for a final view. During this last season, he says every single sunrise has felt brighter. Every sunset has been more meaningful. Every quiet afternoon has become another treasured memory in a forest that has literally been his office for over half a century. As the evening sun paints the mountains gold and he closes those lookout windows for the final time, he looks out across the endless forest stretching to the horizon, and he softly says this: "People think I watched for fires, but all my life I watched over a forest that never knew my name." I mean, wow, it is a profoundly moving testament to his character. The immense humility of his unseen 61-year service is just staggering. He sought no fame, no viral recognition, just quiet, steadfast stewardship as the darkness slowly settles and the wind whispers through the pine trees. Which leaves us with this final, vital question for you. What forests are you quietly watching over in your own life? Dan's legacy challenges all of us, really. In our fast-paced, constantly distracted world, where are you applying quiet, dedicated stewardship? Where are you giving your deep, undivided attention without expecting a single round of applause or recognition? I really hope Dan's story inspires you to always look twice and to truly understand the world around you, not just collect information about it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep looking closely, and I'll catch you next time.